Rishi Sunak announced the date of the general election in the pouring rain with "things can only get better" blaring in the background. Keir Starmer's response had a more professional look. We'll show you the whole speech here.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for, and where, by the force of our democracy, power returns to you. A chance to change for the better your future, your community, your country. Now, it will feel like a long campaign, I'm sure of that. But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about. Over the course of the last 4 years, we've changed the Labour Party, returned it once more to the service of working people. All we ask now, humbly, is to do exactly the same for our country and return Britain to the service of working people. To that purpose, we offer why you should change Britain with Labour. One, because we will stop the chaos. Look around our country. The sewage in our rivers, people waiting on trolleys in A&E, crime virtually unpunished, mortgages and food prices through the roof. It's all, every bit of it, a direct result of the Tory chaos in Westminster. Time and again, they pursue their own interests rather than tackling the issues that affect your family. And if they get another 5 years, they will feel entitled to carry on exactly as they are. Nothing will change. A vote for Labour is a vote for stability, economic and political. A politics that treads more lightly on all our lives. A vote to stop the chaos. Two, because it's time for change. Our offer is to reset both our economy and our politics so that they once again serve the interests of working people. We totally reject the Tory view that economic strength is somehow gifted from those at the top. Over the past 14 years, through all the crises we've had to face, sticking with that idea has left our country exposed, insecure, and unable to unlock the potential of every community. But a vote for Labour is a vote to turn the page on all that. A vote for change. And finally, three, because we have a long-term plan to rebuild Britain. A plan that is ready to go, fully costed and fully funded. We can deliver economic stability, cut the NHS waiting times, secure our borders with a new border security command, harness great British energy to cut your bills for good, tackle antisocial behaviour, and get the teachers we need in your children's classroom. But most importantly of all, we do all this with a new spirit of service. Country first, party second. A rejection of the gesture politics you will see in this campaign, I have no doubt, from the Tories and the SNP. I'm well aware of the cynicism people hold towards politicians at the moment. But I came into politics late, having served our country as leader of the Crown Prosecution Service. And I helped the police service in Northern Ireland to gain the consent of all communities. Service of our country is the reason and the only reason why I am standing here now asking for your vote. And I believe with patience, determination, and that commitment to service, there is so much pride and potential we can unlock across our country. So here it is, the future of the country in your hands. On the 4th of July, you have the choice. And together, we can stop the chaos, we can turn the page, we can start to rebuild Britain and change our country. Thank you.
So Keir Starmer's people are going to be very happy with how this evening has gone. You had Rishi Sunak out in the pouring rain giving a kind of depressing speech. Keir Starmer standing sort of in front of two Union Jacks in a wood-panelled room and sounding very in control. So he's saying his pitch, Labour will stop the chaos, make politics tread light again. So he's sort of saying, we're not going to be overdramatic. You don't have to be interested in politics if Labour are in power. You can kind of forget it. We'll sort it out so you can get on with your life. They're saying we'll bring about change. He sort of made some sort of some points about a more equal economy, saying we don't believe in trickle down, essentially. He's saying we've got a long-term plan. We'll deliver economic stability. Basically, we're safe. We're non-scary. You can trust us. And we might do some nice things around the edges. A line I quite liked is him saying, I got into politics late, which I think is smart, right? Because people don't really like politicians. People are mistrustful of people who spent their whole life sort of trying to work in Westminster to get political power. And so he's saying, actually, I had a job with lots of responsibility, but I wasn't a politician, which, I don't think people will dislike. I suppose turning around the whole I'm a North London lawyer thing, which interestingly we didn't hear from Rishi Sunak's speech when he was sort of attacking Starmer. That one seems to, they don't seem to think that has that much traction. Moya, what did you think of that pitch from the Labour Party? They clearly have been sort of planning what their election pitch will be for a while. So I doubt that was just sort of scribbled down this morning.
Well, no, they've been campaigning for the last, since 2020, since Starmer got into power. What I thought was funny was the Union Jacks, and they looked from Tories to Labour and from the Labour to the Tories, but already it was impossible to tell which was which. Came to my mind. It is very funny how much Starmer talks about this idea of gesture politics, and then proceeds to engage in it. This is what is disappointing about this iteration of the Labour Party, in that I don't know whether it is just they are so short-sighted, or whether it's like this deliberate talking out the both sides of their mouth. But it's this constant reference to, we don't do gesture politics, we don't do spectacle politics. And then immediately preceding or after having done that very same gesture politics, he was talking about these so-called infrastructure projects that they're going to be building, and the spectacle of infrastructure has been dangled in front of us by successive leaders, Boris Johnson. Liz Truss, she didn't have a chance and she didn't care about anything but tanks. And Rishi Sunak, we're going to do this, we're going to build this, we're going to redo the NHS, here are our pledges, pledge. And then nothing ever happens. Occasionally they'll turn up to the opening of a free port or something like that. And it's because there's no real money allocated to these infrastructure projects. And Starmer is doing the same thing, because he's talking about, we're going to build Great British Railways, or we're going to, reinvest in the NHS. But if you look at the costings that they have done, the fully costed manifesto, there isn't really money for that. That is of the scale it would take to actually rebuild that infrastructure for people so that it works. Instead of the infrastructure is still geared around this idea of moving the capital from Britain to foreign interests. So, like, for example, our railway stock. So we've talked about Great British Railways before, this big new Labour pledge. It sounds amazing. We're going to renationalise the railways. Great, but you're not going to renationalise the actual carriages, the rolling stock, which are owned by often foreign companies and leased back to operators, rail operators in the UK, which cost millions of pounds. That's why your ticket prices are so high. It's not just like the contracts we're giving out the franchises. It's also because we are literally having to rent back the very train carriages you're riding on. And those dividends are either going to shareholders, or they're going back into subsidising the railways of places like France and Italy. So when he talks about we're not doing gesture politics, well, you're literally doing what I call gesture politics, which you're gesturing at something, but you're not actually getting to the granular detail of what it would take to make it work. But it doesn't matter right now. That's the problem. Right now, that election is shored up. Labour are going to win the election. Keir Starmer is going to be Prime Minister. What it matters, though, and I think we've repeated this several times, but I'm going to say it one more time, is that if Labour fail to deliver on their pledges, and they love pledges, and I'm going to talk more about deliverology later in the show, but they love a pledge. And if Labour fail to deliver on these pledges, we're going to end up with more disappointment. And there has been 14 years of disappointment in this country, 14 years of stagnation, 14 years of decline. And if Labour cannot turn that around, there is going to be this massive gulf, and there's going to be a very rabid section of the opposition who are ready to fill it. There's going to be more schisms, maybe there will be a left insurgency from somewhere, I don't know. But we will see more of a splintering of collective ideas of good in this country. And I think more of a shrinking of what we expect from the state, and more of this scarcity mindset, and more of the aggression that you see among everyday people. And that does scare me. It does scare me because I think when hopelessness takes over and you get the promise of something new and something fresh, and if it doesn't deliver, those disappointed and broken hopes will be very dangerous indeed for the direction of Britain. But in the meantime, Keir Starmer knows he's going to be Prime Minister, and he's probably already prepared his very boring outfit.
I suppose they'd say, because I agree that, there's lots of holes in their plan for government. But in terms of, being short-sighted or long-sighted, they'd say we've been ready for every challenge so far, right? They've clearly been planning the Labour leadership election for a long time. It was incredibly successful. They've clearly been sort of quite single-minded in the sense of we want to get to the next general election as electable as we can be. And they're, according to YouGov, 27 points ahead in the polls. So far, they'll say we've proven ourselves. But yeah, we'll have to see if they win, what they do in government, because there are some big holes in their plans. Essentially, they're saying we're going to rebuild Britain, but with no money, which doesn't make that much sense. There will be other parties vying for your votes at this general election. I'm not sure if we have many sort of Farage voters who watch this show, but if you do, welcome. Let's go to Reform UK's honorary president.
So there it is, July the 4th, Independence Day in America, and for this country, Deliverance Day from a bunch of charlatans who call themselves conservatives but govern as big state liberals. I mean, look at it. Look at the images. The lack of professionalism is unbelievable. To stand there getting soaked in the rain, to read from the notes like a robot, without passion, without belief, without vim, without vigour. But it sums up 14 years of conservatism, why they are going to get wiped in this election. But what he has done, he's chosen suicide over total obliteration, because as the months go by, it'll get worse and worse and worse. No planes will go to Rwanda whatsoever. Got to tell you, I don't like the look of a Labour government one little bit, but this lot, having betrayed Brexit, having betrayed everything I gave them in 2019, all the help I gave them back 5 years ago, deserve everything that is coming to them.
He was really rinsing him. He really enjoyed that, right? Really laying into Rishi Sunak, quite personal. And yeah, I mean, Reform haven't performed very well in the polls so far. I mean, the polls in elections, in actually existing elections. So in sort of the local elections, they didn't do very well at all. But they will have quite a lot of airtime in this general election because they have got those charismatic leaders. So we'll see. The Tories are very worried about Reform. Should they be more worried about the Lib Dems? Now, that is a real risk for them. People are talking, the last election was about the red wall. This election could be about the blue wall. People abandoning the Conservatives in relatively safe seats. Some of them might go to the Lib Dems. And this was their leader, Ed Davey.
The Liberal Democrats are fighting a really strong campaign across the country, and in many parts of the country it is the Liberal Democrats who can beat the Conservatives. We're the only party who can beat the Conservatives across the blue wall. We're here in Surrey. Everyone knows the battle here is between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. But so many other counties and across the home counties in the southwest of England and many other places too. If people want to get rid of the Conservative MP, they need to vote Liberal Democrat, and they can get that local champion that will stand up for them.
It's interesting that that's the pitch, right? He didn't say anything whatsoever about Lib Dem policies or what. I mean, maybe in the longer one he did, but in the clip we showed you, and it doesn't seem that sort of the Lib Dems are a really important party. You know, we've got great policies. It's like, well, you hate the Tories, and in some seats we're the only people that can beat them, right? But that's as far as it gets. No attacks on the Labour Party because they know that there's going to be a Labour majority. If you want to punish the Tories, in some seats, vote for us. As far as we can tell, there hasn't been sort of a Green Party leader who has sort of directly responded to Rishi Sunak's speech and him announcing a general election. But on their Twitter account, they have released their sort of opening campaign video.
The general election has been called.
And now voters across the country will have the chance to elect the next generation of Green MPs.
The Green Party has a plan to end our national housing crisis. We would create 150,000 new council homes per year and end right to buy so that homes can belong to communities forever. And we'd introduce rent controls and end no-fault evictions to give families much needed security.
We would introduce a new Nature Act to protect and restore the natural world.
We'd reverse the creeping privatisation of our NHS.
The Green Party would bring in a fair tax system. Getting the absolute richest to pay a bit more would raise 50 billion.
All of this is possible with Green MPs in Parliament.
So make sure you vote Green and help us build a fairer, greener country.
Now, it's a fine pitch. I do think, it is a bit... I've looked on Adrian Ramsey's Twitter account, on Carla Denya's Twitter account. We've got Sky News on live. It does seem a bit disappointing that we haven't had a sort of to-camera response to Rishi Sunak from the Greens. I mean, I will stand corrected if they have, but as far as I can see, they haven't. And, obviously, getting in there, Nigel Farage with that attack on Rishi Sunak, Ed Davey, it's not a particularly inspirational response, but, you can see he's present for a general election. Keir Starmer as well. I wonder if this is something that's a bit lacking with the Greens, sort of like being there at every moment. They sort of say they struggle to get media. Well, you need to put yourself in front of those cameras. We will be talking to lots of Green politicians throughout this election, as I have said. But I don't know if I should... Moira, am I reading too much into the fact that, I haven't seen a Green Party politician sort of directly respond to Rishi Sunak and say he looked like an idiot in the rain?
You keep bopping to me while I'm checking my texts. Not even texts. By texts, I mean books, by the way, not even phone texts. Are you making too much of the fact you haven't seen a really charismatic politician, Green or otherwise, on your radar? Well, it depends what you think the country's going to vote for, Michael. Do you think people are in a place where they will only be convinced by, the charismatic Boris Johnson-esque figures still? Do you think that the snake oil salesmen are the people who are going to come through? I think there are maybe good arguments that we've seen in local elections, by-elections, that would suggest when you get a charismatic politician who seems to be saying all the right stuff, then people will opt for them. But there are also counter-arguments where we've seen local politicians who don't have the same sort of like Westminster oily sheen, who've made real inroads in competitions. But like I said earlier, general elections are different. I do think it really depends where you think the electorate is at in the way that it wants to assess the people vying to represent their local area and also how invested they are. So I think Greens will make traction if they are able to really get out there and convince a disengaged population in specific areas that, yes, we can make a change and you have to believe in us. But this idea of instilling hope is always a really difficult one, especially if you're part of a party that hasn't, if they're not a party that's been in the local council and already has had an opportunity to make like real community change on the level, people are not going to believe in you as much, because I do think they've been burned by X amount of years of politicians promising things and never delivering. And so I feel one of the mistakes Starmer is making is he and his team, and maybe they don't care, is they're obsessed with this idea of being electable. And there's a reason that they're like his personal popularity is low compared to, I don't know, the personal popularity of some of the leaders past whose names I won't mention, so I don't get into mired in arguments there. But he hasn't built up, and Labour hasn't built up, these community-based routes where they really have shown they can make a difference. And, in certain areas, there's been Labour councils instilled for ages that people actively want out because they don't think they've made a difference. The local elections went well for them and really well for them. But there were spaces where people were like, this is strange. You should be dominating even more than you shouldn't. It's because they haven't made that extra effort to really embed themselves in community. It's all about, vote for us to get the Tories out. And I don't know whether it will be, in the end, a vote to get Tories out that turns out as much as they expect. I think the massive majority, but I think it will also be won mostly by people staying home. And what you really need to harness is that feeling where you get people behind you rather than relying on the opposite party to have people staying back or falling back from supporting them. And in answer to your main question was, why haven't I seen Greens there? Whether Greens do well or not will depend on whether in the local areas they target, they can actually do that, get out in the community and really show that they can make a difference, but they're facing an uphill battle there. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think probably it's the next general election where the Greens will be a big player, because if Labour enter government and then they are a bit disappointing, then I can imagine them losing votes to the Greens. I think because this is a change election and people really, really want to see the Tories out, that is going to be quite helpful for Labour, even among sort of the demographics that are a bit sceptical about them, because I think people just think we need rid of this Conservative government.